Hello, my name is Naziema Jappie, and I'm a director in the Center for Higher Education and Development at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to my presentation on accelerating creativity and realizing student potential in higher education. Is assessment the solution? I would like to talk a little bit about the transformation agenda in South Africa. Post 1994, South Africa had to review its entire education policy framework. And in that, we had to look at four key areas. Firstly, equity of access and fair chance of success for all who are seeking to realize their potential through higher education. Secondly, we had to have a well-planned and coordinated teaching, learning, and research programs for the national development needs, including the high-skilled employment needs presented by a growing economy operating in a global environment. Thirdly, we had to support a democratic ethos and a culture of human rights. And finally, we had to contribute to the advancement of all forms of knowledge and scholarship and address the diverse problems that existed in the country. We are still in the process of transformation, and the impact of COVID-19 on education has given us many more challenges. South Africa took the coronavirus pandemic very seriously since its first cases in early March. With that, the country went into a total lockdown with the closure of the economic sector and the education sector. Universities had to immediately shift to online teaching and learning through various initiatives and digital platforms. According to UNESCO, in early April, 9.8 million African students were experiencing disruption in their studies due to the closure of higher education institutions. However, going online is not that simple on a continent where only 24% of the population have access to internet. The challenges we face are great. Our students live in rural areas with large families and have poor internet connectivity, and in some cases no connectivity at all. They experience frequent power interruptions and have no sanitation and running water. Many students do not have devices, do not have data, and therefore the universities had to make every attempt to try and make sure that no student was left behind. Each university attended and responded to the crisis in the best way they could. So during this time, the question we have to ask ourselves is, does standardized testing give us the best solution in recognizing potential in a time of crisis? We know that testing is an enterprise that has mushroomed in the last 20 years and has become very competitive. We also know that education departments want numbers when they look at students, schools, higher education, and state systems, and how students compare to those of other countries. We also know that among political and institutional leaders, testing is turning into a means of reform rather than just a way of finding out whether reforms have been effective. So why do we test and what do we test? For many decades, and we have been using standardized tests, which is an examination that's administered and scored in a predetermined, standardized manner. There are two major kinds of standardized tests which we know of: aptitude tests and achievement tests. Standardized aptitude tests predict how well students are likely to perform in some subsequent educational setting. Good examples of these are the SATs and the ACT. In South Africa, we have a very similar entrance test, which is called the National Benchmark Test. And all of these attempt to forecast how well high school students will perform in university. And so it is about whether students are ready for university. But the standardized achievement test scores are what citizens and school board members rely on when they evaluate a school's effectiveness. So, what is the National Benchmark Test? It has four objectives. One, to assess entry-level academic quantitative literacy and mathematics proficiency of students. Secondly, to assess the relationship between higher education entry-level requirements and school-level exit outcomes. Thirdly, to provide a service to the institutions requiring additional information to assist in admissions, selections, and placements of students in appropriate curricula. Lastly, to assist with curriculum development, particularly in relation to the foundation and augmented courses. The National Benchmark Test has 4 levels. The first one is a proficient level, and the performance in this area suggests that the student will be able to manage academically and can be left to study independently. The intermediate upper is where students are likely to need complementary support. They may need workshops, tutorials, extra classes. In the intermediate lower, it means that students will have to be placed in an extended program. Basic tells us that there can be serious learning challenges for these students, and it is preferred that these students go into the colleges for further education and training, or that these students have to have long-term support, perhaps best provided through bridging programs. We have seen that in the various levels, the performance of these students in the National Benchmark Test, and when we look at their results in the first year of university, we do find that some of the students really struggle if they are in the basic and the intermediate category, especially in mathematics. So some of the questions we ask when we do analysis is how well are students doing in AQL and mathematics? How that has changed over time, because we are now conducting this test for the last 10 years. What is the impact of the COVID-19 on assessments? Will students do better now that the assessment is going to be online and not a pencil paper test? How are disadvantaged students doing? Are there differences in socioeconomic classes on performance? And this is something we would like to consider studying further when the test goes online. What's the argument? A source of conflict among professionals is competing philosophies regarding the appropriateness of measuring university readiness in students. Some experts believe that students are ready for university just by virtue of their grades. For example, in South Africa, the argument is that if students write the National Senior Certificate in grade 12, is there really a need for them to write the National Benchmark Test to enter a university or to gain admissions? Others believe that some kind of assessment needs to be performed to accurately gauge what students can do, how well they know the subject matter, and to plan instruction that meets the needs of all students. Whether this happens or not, I cannot say, but we know that this is not normally the case. Are students able to think critically by just measuring one aspect of their knowledge base? These are the arguments that people put forward around standardized testing. Standardized testing is highly controversial and well-debated topic. Many people believe that standardized testing provides an accurate measurement of student performance. Other people think that a single test on a single day cannot consistently gauge these things and that the practice is extremely overused. No matter which side of the debate you stand on, the practice of standardized testing will continue to be discussed and debated. Both sides of the standardized testing debate have passionate arguments. So, what are these? And we will talk about it in the next slide. So, what are the views? The pros. Firstly, testing holds teachers and schools accountable. It allows education departments to compare students located in various schools and districts. Standardized testing is typically accompanied by a set of established standards or instructional framework, which provides teachers with guidance for what and when something needs to be taught. These tests are objective and they provide accurate comparisons between subgroups. What are the cons for this? Standardized tests evaluate a student's performance on a particular day and does not consider external factors. Many people simply do not perform well on tests. It allows teachers to teach to test. It evaluates the individual performance of the student instead of the overall growth of that student over the course of the year. It can create a lot of stress for both educators and students. Standardized testing can be wrongfully used for fuel for those with political agenda. Brown et al. 1997 point out that if you want to change student learning, then change the method of assessment. The corollary of this is that if one changes the method of teaching but keeps the assessment unchanged, one is likely to fail. Thus, to get assessment right is vitally important. Assessment must be in line with the desired learning objective. How to get the assessment right that is in line with the learning objective, or at least as right as possible, should be a major concern in any approach to assessment. As Hinnett and Knight point out, the traditional assessment practices are inappropriate for many innovative approaches to teaching and learning, particularly those which place student as a central in the teaching learning process and those which are concerned with the development of academic and or life skills has in principle been largely accepted. However, because in general it is even more difficult to assess skills reliably than content, they tend to be treated peripherally in assessment. We have to ensure that whatever assessments we provide, those assessments should be fair. This slide actually gives you a very good indication of what that actually means. We look at traditional tests and we need to look at the assessments and think, are these traditional assessments fair? Are they equal? Do they take into account all types of students that come into the university? If you look at the graphic, you will see that the instruction for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. And the instruction is that everyone in that graphic should climb the tree. Now, if we look at that, we know very well that there are many animals in that picture that cannot climb trees. So when we talk about assessments being fair, we are talking about equity. With that, I'd like to end my presentation by saying that measurement experts agree that no test is good enough to serve as the sole or primary basis for any of these important educational decisions. So in conclusion, I just want to say we may have the right task, but we may have the wrong tool. And that is something that we need to remember. I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much. Thank you for attending and thank you for listening to this short presentation.